Hi there, and welcome to week 8 of the Cool Flowers virtual book study. I'm so glad you decided to join us. This week we're talking about easy the finishing touches that you're going to put on your garden that really can be applied to any area of gardening, not just your cool flowers planting. Before we get started, just a reminder that down below there are links there for your use. First, there is a link that you can sign up to have an email dropped into your mailbox each week as soon as the link goes live. There is also a list of vendors, and you can pick your favorite vendor to pick up your copy of Cool Flowers if you don't already have one. And there is also an area where you can post your questions. And I am working hard at replying to everybody's questions, so please don't hesitate to ask. And it is really beneficial for you to post your question here, because I can promise you that there are other people that have the same question that you do. So don't be afraid, and there are no dumb questions, so please make use of that. And also, there is a page on my website, thegardenersworkshop.com, with this book study that will be on our page anytime you'd like to access it. And you can go there and watch past weeks, share them with your friends, and we really appreciate you sharing this. This is really how word gets out about this great group of flowers that we're learning about that we plant in either fall, winter, or very early spring, just depending on where you're gardening. So please, I can't emphasize enough how significant it helps us for you to share the link with the book study and to post reviews on our website for the book and on Amazon. So we appreciate all that very much. So I want to read to you about my first years in farming and how doing what we're going to talk about today can change everything for you. So I'm reading from page 107. During my first years as a flower farmer, I can remember feeling overwhelmed and even desperate for relief at times. It seemed as though there just wasn't enough of me to go around. Sound familiar? I went to bed each night with more on the to-do list than I had when I began the day. The problem quickly snowballed out of control. In a garden and on a farm, the chores you don't get to tend to keep growing into bigger jobs, bigger than when you first put them on the chore list. Get the idea? Your chores mushroom into even more work you don't have time to do. And boy, if that isn't a statement, that is still true today. My lack of desire to have that feeling every night is what drove me to try to figure out how to garden smarter. And I will say that the start to that is to not plant too big of a garden. Our eyes are bigger than our daytime available to garden is, and when you overplant, you really snowball this. So I'm just going to kind of go over some of the areas that really have helped me. They're all in Cool Flowers, and they go into more depth on actually how to do it, but I'll kind of give you my what's behind what drove me to do it. So the first thing to know is that, just like what we just read, if you don't get to a job, it gets worse, bigger, more labor needed every hour that you don't get to it. You know, it's so crazy for me in the garden here. If there's an area that back before I really had a weed prevention program that needed to be weeded, but you don't have time to do it. As a flower farmer, obviously, cutting the flowers is the first job you have to do. The weeding was like down here at number 5 somewhere. If you don't get to it, well, my goodness, if you don't get to it for 2 more days, it is so much worse. And then you really don't have time to do it. So staying ahead of the chores is the goal. Meaning, if you have 5 things on your list and you know that you're not going to get to them all, you need to start looking at how you can eliminate either how much work each one takes, or you have to eliminate something. I often will ditch an area of the garden because if I don't get to it, it grows out of control. Then I try to get it under control. There's other things that are getting out of control. So sometimes I'll just say, fine, well, that's a wash. I'm leaving that so that I can get ahead of my list. So staying ahead of your list or staying on point really makes a significant difference with gardening. And so an area that almost killed me was direct sowing seeds into our garden. And the reason that that particular chore was so difficult is because of the weed pressure. You know, I hadn't quite figured out how to do that and to keep it from being such an ongoing problem. And so now we direct seed as little as possible because it is definitely more intense labor when you plant seeds in a garden than when you plant transplants. It's just more work. But as you've learned through this book study and reading Cool Flowers, that there are some seeds that really just must be planted straight out in the garden. And I find that to be true only with hardy annuals. Our experience with tender annuals, you know, the warm season flowers, they can all be started indoors with success. So with direct seeding, you know, Cool Flowers takes you through how to set up the bed, how to, you know, sow the seeds. And I've already shared that I tend to leave more room between my rows. Now when I direct seed, used to be our beds are 30 inches wide, 30 to 36 inches. We used to put 4 rows of seeds into those gardens, but weeding with a hoe was just so difficult that I now only put 3 rows of seeds. And, you know, we're talking larkspur and buplurum and bells of Ireland and poppies and bachelor buttons and dill. So we put only 3 rows, and that is purely for weeding ease or hoeing ease. So we plant our seeds, and we immediately, or I am the official hoer on this garden. I particularly kind of like to hoe. Once you learn how to do it, and you use the right tool, you will find that it's probably one of your most pleasant garden chores because you can get a lot of thinking done when you're hoeing. So 3 rows in a bed, and if I plant seeds today, in 1 week, I put it on my calendar, make a date, do not miss it. I go out and hoe the garden. If I have a 100-foot bed, at this point, when there's no weeds growing in the bed, sprouting even, hardly, well, they're sprouting, but you can't see them yet, it might take me 10 to 20 minutes at the most to hoe an entire 100-foot bed using the stand-up garden hoe. And there is a video on our website under the how-tos, trying to think where it is, under how-tos video guide, showing you how to use the trapezoid hoe. We sell the same hoe that I use. And you stand upright, it's not bending over, and I mean, it's just a quick and easy job. If you have a smaller garden and you like to be down on the ground, the Japanese hand hoe, which comes in a right and a left-handed model, works exactly the same way. So once a week, I go out to that garden and use 1 or 2 of those hoes. Takes me no time. This prevents you from ever walking outside and walking to your flower bed and going, oh my gosh, what happened? Where are my seeds? They're covered in weeds. When you do it once a week, make a date. And we do that once a week until the bed can be mulched. So staying ahead of hoeing. Don't miss that date. We always plant transplants in the garden into mulch. For us, that mulch is a black biodegradable film. The beds are made, they're covered in film, and we plant transplants. We used to use straw, shredded up, chopped up leaves, bark, pine straw. whatever. By mulching the bed first before you plant, it's really easy to plant into it, and that really keeps you ahead of the weeding game. Obviously, you do not have to hoe mulched beds. That's the whole point. That's why we choose transplants over seed sowing right in the garden. And so transplanting straight into mulch used to be I'd plant and then mulch around them, and you have to take so long. You have to be so careful. So we've just flip-flopped it. Beds are mulched, which also means that bed can sit there and wait for your transplants until it's ready, because weed seeds are not sprouting and getting ahead. So covering the soil as soon as possible is a big help in preventing weeds. Row cover. We use a lot of row cover here. We hoop and row cover. You can see the hoops on our website, on our store. It's number 9 wire. And so first let me say, we always cover with a row cover all of our plantings for about 10 to 15 days, regardless the time of year that it is. That protects the seedlings or the seeds from wildlife, retains moisture, and just kind of generally gives them a nice little area of safety to grow up in. And then we take it off. However, for cool flowers, I hoop and cover all of our beds once it starts to get chilly. Right now we're at the end of summer. Our seedlings were just started for cool flowers. They would not be covered. We plant typically the 1st of October. We cover direct seeded stuff immediately for best germination, but I do not cover my transplants until the nights start getting a little cool and the days get cool, because you don't want to cook these cool season transplants under the row cover, because it definitely gets warmer there on sunny afternoons. Why we hoop and cover cool flowers is because it protects our plants from wind and deer all winter long. Both really big problems. We live in a windy situation. So row cover and hoops are for more than cold protection. We talked about mulch a little bit. If you think about the mulch in your garden, it is really the armor of the soil. Okay, if you don't put mulch down, your soil is open for weeds, for erosion. So stay on top of mulching your garden or using some kind of film. We use biodegradable film. That really makes a huge difference. We haven't really talked about netting, floral support netting, flower support netting, or trellis. We do not install any of those until early spring. You don't have to worry with any of those in the fall. So you can check those out. The how to use them are completely gone over in Cool Flowers, but you don't do anything with them until spring. We do put dry organic fertilizer in our soil when we're preparing our beds before planting. That is pretty much all that the plants get at this time of year. Then come very early spring, we love to give them I call it a bubble bath in fish seaweed. We spray it on with a hose sprayer and just give them a dousing, and it soaks into the soil. That really gives them a good boost. And just follow the directions on the fertilizer that you're using. So I hope that these tips have helped you kind of grasped that the secret to having a great garden is being ahead of the chores, and you need to make your garden so you can do that. In the early years, when I was growing way more than I could tend, you kind of tend to do that when you are just starting out. I'm telling you, I mean, I thought I was going to die. And then through the years, as I realized it didn't have to be that way, I figured out these steps, and you can do the same and apply them to your garden. So if I was a flower farmer, I would be thinking right now, wow, if I hooped and covered my beds, I'll tell you what else that does. It warms the soil, keeps the soil at a warmer temperature than uncovered beds, which means your plants grow more, which means you get blooms a little bit earlier. This is how you can manipulate out in the garden growing with these little low tunnels, we call them. So I'd be thinking to myself, wow, I can cover these beds for the winter and get blooms maybe a week earlier and just better quality plants while I'm protecting from deer. If I was a home gardener, I'd be thinking, good gracious, the power of mulch to prevent weeds is my secret ingredient to gardening. You have to trump the other things that you want to do in your garden, and mulching needs to move to the top of your list to prevent weeds. And another great tip is to use either newspaper or that biodegradable film under mulch, and it really prevents weeds. So I look really forward to seeing you here next week, week 9, which is And Now, the rewards, and we'll talk about all the great flowers that you're growing. So don't forget to post your comments and your questions. Please hit my website, go to our store, to the book, post your reviews so I can share those with others. And I appreciate you sharing this book study with your friends and garden clubs and master gardener groups. So thanks so much, and see you here next week.